Buenas, buenas, buenas. I'm Vanessa, the host of Chicklet, a podcast to empower women. Each episode, I'll unlock the power of stories by exploring popular chicklet themes and use them as a starting point for insightful conversations. Today's episode is on the book The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van Kolk. I actually said it wrong in the first episode. It's Bessel van der Kolk, and I just said Van Kolk. It's van der Kolk. But I also have my friend Juliana Londoño here with me. Hi, Juliana.
Hello. Hi.
How are you? I love that you're on my podcast with me.
Thank you for having me. About time.
I'm so excited. Let's tell the people how we know each other.
So I feel like I've known you forever, but we met through our connection with being Latina, being Colombian, living in New Jersey, specifically northern New Jersey, and our connection with Latino organizations, but really I think it was the fact that we're in so many intersecting of identities and really find the community in that way.
And I also feel like our personality is super similar. I feel like we're both really outspoken and we have no problem taking up space. And so when we meet people that are like that, I feel like super connected to them and I feel more like emboldened by being near you. You know, we can both be ourselves, and I know that if I say something, you know like who I am and like I know how you are. So it's like I just feel super comfortable being like my crazy normal self with you, which is so important. Like we need to be intentional about making friends that make us feel comfortable, and you make me feel comfortable.
I love it. I love it. You do the same for me, and you have supported me so much in the summer and the madness and the craziness of life, right? That we all go through, that we all experience. So I'm happy that we're going to get into that today.
Another thing that I want to do with having you on the podcast is I want to like humanize therapists to the audience. I know, you know, I've gone to so many different therapists, I think like 7. And I know, you know, they've shared with me that they have their own struggles and that they, you know, have problems in their relationships, or they struggle with their children, or they struggle with like a work-life balance. And I feel like that's a common misconception with people going to therapists. They think that therapists are perfect and they know all the answers, and that you as the client are the only one with problems. And I know that you are super vocal about the fact that you are, you know, a therapist and you struggle as well. Like I know you just posted that video. When this drops, it'll have been, you know, a month probably since that video. But I think it's so important. I think you're positively impacting a lot of people by showing the human side of who you are.
Well, first, I appreciate that you recognize it's right. It's hard for us as therapists. It's very, very, when you're sick with someone, just be told, right? Sometimes what you're hearing in a client is so close to what you're experiencing. And right, as much as I want to be like, oh my God, right? Like I can't say that because I'm there for the client, but it's something that is so true that right, I'm a therapist, and yes, I have all this training and I can recite different coping skills and coping mechanisms, but I'm human first. We're all in this journey of figuring it out. Right? There is no blueprint.
Literally. No, I think it's funny that you say that everyone's trying their best, because it reminds me of a time where I had a therapist and she actually apologized to me for the way that she showed up in one of our sessions. And not a lot of people realize that, you know, that she made a mistake as a clinician, as like a licensed therapist. So she apologized to me, and I thought that was really valuable, and I think it really helped me be able to show up in our conversations like more authentically, because it wasn't like this power dynamic of like she's this smart person and I'm this dumb person. She's this whole and perfect person and I was imperfect and lost and needed her guidance. Like I feel like it really leveled the playing field, and I just I really appreciated that, and I feel like you do that as well. And I also feel like we did not intro the fact that you are a therapist. Like we did not intro that like enough. Like, you are a Latina therapist, and that is what you do. You do so many things. You're out here going to so many different types of events, representing Latinas, and you know how, like, obviously we all know that representation is super powerful. Like, if people see that you are out here doing it, then they feel empowered, you know, to do that as well. I love all that you do. You're so active in literally so many different spaces.
Yeah, right. I think we have to, right, as Latinas, in whatever role or whatever our function is, right, we hold that representation to such a higher standard. That is what keeps me going. It's the fact that, right, I'm holding space to be someone's first, but I want that narrative to change, and I'm working hard on that.
By you being the first, you're opening the door for other people to be next, right? Like, if you're the first Latina therapist that a company hires, they're gonna be like, oh, okay, well, we could keep going down that lane and hire other Latinas or other therapists to keep talking about all these, you know, great topics that you share about. And it's super important, and I love that you do that. That's why I try to support all of your, like, efforts, you know what I'm saying? Because, like, so many people are positively impacted by it that it's like, that's why I always comment on everything, like everything, and help in just like the ways that I can, because it can be isolating when everyone else has a 9 to 5 and they clock in and do their stuff and then they leave. And then it's like, you're like, no, I can't hang out. I have to go be a speaker here, or I have to attend this event. And you miss out on some stuff, you know, by being out there in the community, trying to get your name out there. So I just want to acknowledge that too. That's another reason why I try to support, you know?
Yeah, no, and really, you are a cheerleader, and I think I've called you that a million times. Like, you are one of my number one cheerleaders. And in this road of entrepreneurship and having your own business, right, you're siloed. And I think a lot of it is unintentional because people don't get it. Right? And that's not on them, right? But we chose this unconventional, non-typical route where you're missing Saturdays, or you're missing family parties, right? Or you can't take that trip, or, you know, it's 11 o'clock at night and people are sleeping, right? And you're here like, all right, I have to answer this email right now.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people maybe don't understand that. So to have that support in that community, and again, from someone that lives close to me, is Latina, is Colombian, right? Like, I know I can call you and be like, fuck, like, or scream or yell or be like, oh my God, like, life sucks today, or this is hard,
Yeah.
right? Like, you get that. And that's so important for us as Latinas to have.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I feel like to your point, like, people really don't get it. It's not that they're being bad friends. It's not that they, like, don't support you. They do support you. They do want you to do well. They just don't get it. And I feel like I get it. I get what you're trying to do. And that's why I'm, like, always trying to, you know, put your name out there and just help in the way, you know, that I can. Especially because you talk about mental health too. Like, what? That is so up my alley. You know, all of my listeners already know that I used to be miserable as fuck. And, like, you don't know that because, like, you've never seen that version of me. But yeah, I used to be depressed as hell, like suicidal ideations, angry, irritable. Like, I would isolate, like, I would completely block people out of my life, like, really unhealthy habits. And so the fact that you're Latina and, like, talking about these normalizing these types of topics, it's, you know, we gotta fight the good fight together. And so that brings us to this book. This book, Body Keeps the Score, was, first of all, you said this, I'm stealing your words, you said it was clinically heavy, because I didn't know how to describe the book in the first episode, but those words, like, really are it. It's so clinically heavy. There's so much terminology. It's almost like half textbook, half, like, not memoir, but like the Bessel's, like, experiences. And I'm glad that you agree with me and I'm not just like some idiot that has low reading comprehension.
No. This book it's a tough read. And I shared with you, right? Like, I wish this book came with a trigger warning, because there were so many things, especially early on, that I was like, oh shit, like, I was not ready to read this. Like, or I wish I was in a better state of mind to process what I was trying to read. But not just that, right? The fact that it's so much terminology, it's so clinically driven, which is phenomenal.
Great.
But it makes it hard for the average person to understand, to relate. I mean, hey, like, I have a master's degree in this, right? Like there were moments that I had to take a pause and be like, all right, Google, what the heck is this word? Right? Like what region of the brain is this again? Like I can't remember this shit. Like it was a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot, and it's a long book.
Yeah, very long. I think it was like 600 pages. And you know, I didn't realize how inaccessible it was because, you know, when I was in college studying to be a special education teacher, you have to take a lot of psychology courses, right? You have to like learn a lot of ways to teach students with disabilities, different ways to teach them. And so you have to learn how the brain works a little bit. Not that I'm a therapist and not that I'm like an expert in it, but I feel like I have like an introduction and a good baseline like understanding of the brain. And so a lot of the words, you know, specifically with like the cortex or, you know, there's like certain like terminology, like scientific words that I had been exposed to going to college and studying to be a teacher, where you're right, it's like it seems a little inaccessible a little bit to people who might not be, you know, college educated or never took a psychology course or don't have a master's in to be a therapist. So I guess that would be like something that, you know, we want books to be accessible, especially with the type of like information and knowledge. Like I would love to see a more accessible version of this book, like an introduction maybe to the topics.
And then that could be for anyone that wants to read this, right? Then you pick it up and you're like, all right, let's see what Juliana and Vanessa are really talking about.
Yeah.
Right? Then it becomes a turn off. And then you're like, well, fuck this. I'm not even going to try it. Right.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, right, for us, being first gen, right, being Latina, all of these identities, right, we're able to see it from that perspective of how accessible is this information to people?
Yeah.
Right. And we're able to really dive into books, literature, right, education and access overall, right, and see it from that perspective. It takes time to read, it's long, and unless you're at this level of an MD, a PhD,
yeah,
right, it's really, really tough to just, right, keep going through paragraphs and pages and chapters of the neurons going off in the brain and what it means and what it does and what's not working.
Honestly, I needed to save my brain power, so I did not read 100% of the book. What I did was once I got toward the middle of it and I noticed that like my brain was fatigued by reading the book, I started looking at the names of the chapters, and I decided like which ones I wanted to dive into, and then I read those sections. So after halfway through the book, I probably read like another 20%. So I did not read the whole thing, and I'm not mad at that. I know some people like feel like, oh, you need to read the whole book. Like I can't start another book until I finish this book. Like, I don't know, girl. I don't know that I need to suffer through this. You know what I'm saying? Like, especially because of a lot of the times when he was talking about his experience, he was talking about his experience like as a clinician, and like it was the topics that he was talking about. We're talking about like Vietnam War vets who did horrendous things. And, you know, he acknowledged, like, I appreciated that he acknowledged how, like, a lot of them struggled with the fact that they were, like, poor in the United States and they really had no other option but to join the military. And then when they joined the military, they went to another country and, like, killed other poor people and civilians. And, like, so it was, like, I appreciated the highlighting of that. But it's like those topics are so heavy, it like weighs on your heart too. So it's like in every sense of the word, like it was super heavy. And I know that we were talking about one of the heavy topics was about the 9/11 example. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So I think it happens actually super early on in the book.
For sure.
I want to say like the first 3 or 4 chapters.
Yep.
And again, like you're reading this book, right? So you're trying to be on your A game. And then he shares a lot about his work, right, in meeting with patients, meeting with clients. And then he goes right into an experience he had with a little boy and his perception of 9/11. And when you work with children, right, it's mainly play. Children don't have the actual language, verbiage to put into words how they're feeling. So we're interpreting their world through their language at that point in time, developmentally, which is play. Whether that's sand tray therapy, whether that is using dolls, using action figures, playing an intentional game, right? There's different ways to go about it. And in this particular example, he talks about art therapy and what the child was actually drawing or painting. And I'm actually going to revert back to you because I can't even remember. All I remember was the feeling. I just remember having my heart ripped out of my chest after reading that paragraph.
Yeah.
And again, it goes to the topic of sometimes things are so shocking that you don't even remember what happened. You just remember how it made you feel on the inside.
Yeah. He was working with like the families of survivors or the people that lived near 9/11 and like helping them process 9/11 and getting through that, right? And so he was talking to the little boy, and the little boy drew a picture of the towers, and they were on fire, and then there was people jumping out of the window, and the little boy put a trampoline in the picture because he just wanted, he was like, yeah, like this will save them. And obviously, as adults, we know that a trampoline would not save them. But Bessel looked at it as like this child was being supported through this emotional, like traumatic time. And because he was being supported by his family, his community, you know, as you know, being in North Jersey during 9/11, you really felt, which sounds corny, I don't want to sound, you know, when I think when people talk about 9/11, they can sound kind of like nationalists a little bit. I don't want to do that, but I do want to acknowledge that like we did all come together as a community. Like I didn't have gym for like 2 or 3 weeks because all of my gym teachers, all of them went to 9/11 to go help look for people and like clean up the debris, you know. And that's not just my experience, that's not my school, like everyone in North Jersey. Like I know that there were towns where they didn't have like firefighters because the firefighters left their towns to go help in 9/11. So it's like, the point is that this little boy was part of that as well, where he was being supported by everyone around him. He had Bessel, you know, a therapist, psychologist, therapist, clinician. He had him to help him through that time. And this little boy was able to think of a solution at his age appropriate level. Trampolines are fun. You know, people were jumping, they needed a place to land, so a trampoline obviously to him made sense, and it really encouraged Bessel to keep, you know, working through like how people's brains, you know, process trauma. Because if you don't have that, if you don't have the community, if you don't have access to support to get through these traumatic things, you're not able to think of a solution. You're not able to determine, okay, next time something fucked up's happen, like you're not able to be creative enough to like process it. But this little boy was, because he was like so emotionally supported. So to your point, depressing, sad as fuck, like the whole entire thing was like heartbreaking. But I think it really highlights the point that like if you are supported, you can process trauma, obviously.
Yeah, right. And I think another key point too with this example of this little boy, it's to show, right, when you're at that age, right, when you're that young, you don't know what you don't know. It's also beautiful to see how a child still be a child during a moment of such heartbreak, fear, terror, and they're trying to process it in their own way, right? And I think that for a lot of us, right, when we talk about intergenerational trauma, when we talk about the traumatic experiences that we had as a child or had to witness as a child, we might not remember, but our brain was trying to do probably something similar to this trampoline solution to a problem that was a million times the magnitude, right? But for that little boy, his brain was able to process it in a way that is so childlike, and the innocence of that, I think that is what shattered my heart. That through that innocence, like at some point for all of us, you're going to be cut, like it's going to be destroyed, right? That innocence, it's so precious. And as time goes on, there's new generations of kids growing up. That innocence and that band of innocence gets shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yeah, I mean, especially with like phones, right? Like we have access to so many horrible things happening in the world right now. And, you know, if these kids have social media, it's in one hand good that we have access to the world and we see what's happening and we can care about other people. Like, that's good. But to your point, like, there's an age-appropriate time where kids have the capacity to separate themselves from those horrible things, because when you're so little, I mean, even as adults, like, you know, when you see a video of someone getting hit or someone falling, like your shin will hurt or your knee will hurt. It's not you, but your brain is like, ah. And so similarly, like these kids, we have to be careful of, you know, the age appropriateness of seeing like fucked up shit, because your brain literally can't determine if you're safe or not if it's constantly seeing people not being safe. So there's certain parts of the brain that develop at different times, right? And so the fact that like, what's the name of the thing all the way at the back? The animal, it's not the animal, but it's like the animal brain where it's like your instincts and like the very basic, like your foundation of your feelings. And it's like that gets developed first, and that gets developed like when you're like in your mom's like stomach, you know? So your mom's feelings and your mom's experiences shape that inner like intuition that's inside of you, and it continues to develop like when you're a baby. And so that's where like attachment comes, right? And then as you continue to age, when like you're 5-10 years old, even up until 25, right, that's when our brains stop developing, you're growing so much. And I don't think that we really realize how we really need to be intentional about like rewiring our brain if our moms were pregnant with us and experienced fucked up shit, if our moms were struggling or our parents were struggling and that affected us as infants and small children. And same when we're 10-15 years old. Like, I think that you know these things, but I didn't come to really appreciate it until this book about how all these foundations are kind of laid, and you have to really work hard to rewiring them to be what you want them to be. I think a lot of us like get stuck in like, oh, well, I'm impulsive and this is how I am, people should accept me. And it's like, sure, people should love you for who you are, and I hope that you're accepted and find safe places, yes. And also we need to try to be healthy people, and I think that this book like did a really good job of highlighting that.
Yeah, there's always room for growth, right? Yeah. No matter how you fit, no matter how old you are, there's always room for growth. And we know this right, through different studies, right, that shows, hey, if you learn a new language, the percentage of getting Alzheimer's as you get older diminishes significantly, right? If you play an instrument, right, there's all of these different studies that show how the brain remains plastic even as you get older. We know that when you're young, everything can be absorbed. And what you mentioned, at the age of 25, our frontal lobe fully developed, which AKA means we kind of have a good foundation at that point, or what we would believe would be a good foundation. But it explains why our teenage years, our young adulthood years are kind of reckless. As you get older, you're like, what the fuck did I do when I was 17? Like, how am I alive right now?
Literally.
Yeah, your frontal lobe, right, wasn't fully developed. But then again, are you going to use that as an excuse? And I think that for a lot of us, right, it's the fact that because things are the way they are, is that an excuse or is it a reason to do better? Is it an excuse to not give a fuck? Or is it a reason to say, I want to do better, I want to be better? And I got that same sense from this book of like, you're going to go through so many different experiences, traumas, hardships, but beautiful and amazing things that are going to alter your brain chemistry. It is up to you on if you want things to be an excuse or a reason.
I love that. I didn't think of that, of it being an excuse or a reason. That's a really good way to look at it. Especially like, I think one of the things, I know Huberman. How do you feel about Huberman? Do you know who that is?
Who the heck is that?
He is on Instagram, and he has a podcast, and he is just like a psychologist, and I think he was a professor at Stanford, but I don't think that he is a professor anymore. And so a couple months ago there was like an article saying that he's lying about being a professor. I've listened to him forever, and he's never once said that he was still a professor. Like, I think that he said that when I was a professor, or like when I used to teach, but like people misconstrued it a little bit. And then also at the same time, women were saying that he's like a womanizer or something. But from what I read, I thought he was just like going on dates with several girls and like dating women at the same, like with several women at the same time. Whereas from a woman, I get how that can be hurtful, but from a man, like from his perspective, like maybe he was just like getting to know people, you know? I don't know. But I bring him up, and I'm not really concerned with that. But what I was gonna say is that he recently was on Joe Rogan's podcast, which is crazy, because I don't want to give Joe Rogan a platform at all. But Huberman was saying how the more hard things that you do, I always look at it as like a confidence boosting thing. So it's like, we've always heard like, oh, make your bed first thing in the morning, or put on nice clothes so that you feel good, work out so that you can like show yourself like, oh, I can lift 30 pounds. Look how strong I am, so that later on when someone wants to like curse you out, you can be like, wait, I'm a strong person, I'm responsible, I'm not going to participate in this, because you've already set the foundation throughout your day, throughout the past few weeks, throughout the past few years, that you're a strong, capable person to be disciplined and not do crazy shit like curse someone out in the middle of the street. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I've always viewed it, is like a confidence building thing. But Huberman was saying that it's a neuroplasticity thing, where the more hard things that you do, you're making new like synapses connections, and your brain is literally actually getting stronger, so that when more hard things come, like losing your job, or problems in your relationship, or anything like scary and really difficult, your brain actually becomes stronger to deal with those things. Whereas like I had always viewed it as like a confidence thing.
Anytime that you're doing something new or challenging or uncomfortable, I'm a very visual person. So I like the example that think of it as like a little mini new explosion that goes on in your brain. Like that synapse is being formed, all these neurotransmitters are coming together at that exact moment, and like every hardship that you go through, think of all of the proofs that you have in your brain. Next thing you know, you're going to have like a bajillion of them. And then all of those coming together are supporting your brain anytime that you face the next obstacle, and the one that's harder, and the one where you lose your job, the one where you're getting a divorce. It's your brain saying, all right, like, we've got this, right? So it really is like, I like to think of it as like these little like poops of like these new things that are formed, because it is, they are new neural pathways that come out of your brain, and that every single time you're just building on that. And so it's kind of like how I love to say my positive affirmations, and every day I build on them. Like my brain is building new pathways to support me when I'm going to need it the most, right? Because one thing we can guarantee is that we're going to have hardships in life. I don't care how much money you make. I don't care how many degrees you have. I don't care where you live. I don't care any of that. One thing that we have guaranteed is we're going to have hardship, and our brain is doing the best that it can, really, to help make those connections so that it's easy for every single day.
And I'm curious, how do you prompt your clients to create new like pathways, or do you even do that? Like, how do you go about that as like a therapist? If you notice that someone is like maybe low self-esteem, or they feel worthless or something, how does that connect with what you were just saying? Like, do you prompt them to like make their bed or brush their teeth, or do I don't know, how do you go about that as a therapist?
It's always interesting, and as much as I'm a therapist, I also love to educate my clients on different things that I know of, that I have the privilege to know about. The example of making your bed, if we were to look at the research of that, it is the number one thing that I think guarantees that you're going to be like the successful millionaire, billionaire individual. The one thing that all successful people have in common is that they make their bed first thing in the morning. It's something so simple, but that could have great value later on in life.
Yeah.
But for my clients, I think a lot of it is meeting them where they're at. Okay, if we're struggling with self-esteem, right? Where is that coming from? I think that's a big one, big one. Yeah. And the other thing is the ability to start reframing, reshifting the thoughts of, if you had all the self-confidence in the world today, right? We got the little like fairy dust and we sprinkled it on you. If you had all this self-confidence, what would you do? Like, what would you actually do with all of it? So to really get them to visualize what that would be, what it feels like.
Yeah.
And I encourage everyone that's listening to try this, because it's also really important for us to, I'm a whole person, I'm a firm believer in manifesting, but then it's another thing to actually sit there and say, okay, what would it be like? What would it actually look like? I think that there's a disconnect between I want to manifest versus I am going to actually sit with the thoughts and process what it would be like if this changed or if this were different, and really breaking it down step by step for how to achieve it.
Yeah, you have to be safe to do that. If you are in a place of survival where you don't have housing or you don't have steady income, if you're like in danger in like any of the basic, human like basic needs, it's going to be hard for you to be creative and daydream of what, you would do if you were a fulfilled, safe person. And so I feel like you provide that safe space in therapy to give people the opportunity to daydream and be creative about how they do want to live their lives where they wouldn't have that space otherwise. So I just want to like call attention to that's what I'm hearing that you're doing.
And what you just described, right? Again, psychoeducation, which is a big part of my role as a therapist, right? You just described Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
We all aim for the self-actualization, right? To be this incredible, driven individual, but none of that can be achieved unless that foundation are basic needs. You have access to food, water, shelter, some type of income, just that mental okayness.
Yeah,
all
safety,
right, I can actually aim for more in life than just the basic needs.
Yeah. And do you know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, how he took that from indigenous people?
He did.
I know. And I would never know, like, was it the Navajo, like, nation? Was it them? I forget, like, what group of indigenous people, but I always try to, like, point that out anytime that we talk about Maslow's, because obviously, like, as a teacher, like, I was taught that. But he actually he flipped it upside down because the indigenous people said that if you focus on community building first, then you have those connections in order to maybe you connect with someone that like has excess food and they can feed you. Maybe you have someone who has an extra room and they can house you, and you can make those connections and build on, the basic needs. But Maslow just flipped it. But I always want to point that out.
We can get into a whole nother conversation.
Literally.
Decolonizing therapy.
Yes.
And if you look at any theory, at what I was taught in my master's, it is all rich white men, mainly European. Yeah. And there's a ton of therapists that I know that are pushing for that decolonization of therapy, not just from how theories can be, but even if we look at it from the diagnosing perspective, it is a can of worms.
And I like that you acknowledge that too, because even this book, right, Bessel is a white dude. He does acknowledge, he talks about like Palestinian people, he talks about like the racism and like the sexism that is he doesn't address them. But even this book was authored by like a white dude. So just like education, and the reason why I left education, psychology is obviously rooted in like white supremacy and trying to like penalizing people who don't fit into a role. Like I think they even mentioned how in the book, Bessel mentioned that people on Medicaid, they're over prescribed Adderall, and it's because they're poor, and like people are just like, yeah, just give them drugs. And it's like, no, it's because they're poor and they don't have housing and they don't have healthy food, and they're just exploiting these poor people. So it's like, to your point, that's a whole other conversation. maybe the people will want that after this. Like maybe we'll get a bunch of comments like, yeah, do decolonizing therapy, like that would stress me the fuck out. But we got to give the people what they want, if that's what they want.
I would need to be prepared, right? Like I would have like PowerPoint research data.
Yes. You should do a presentation on that, like a workshop on that. I'm sure if you did that online, like even a LinkedIn thing, or had people like sign up, I know for a fact that I would go to that workshop.
You're giving me ideas. I like this. Because that's a big topic, right? I think it's an elephant in the room. And one thing that I love to say is that I love calling out the elephant in the room. I have no problem being that person. And all of the theory is all of my education, everything that I've learned from a therapist, rooted in the white version of what psychology, therapy, psychopharmacology should be.
Yeah.
From the perspective of a white man. Yeah. And here I am, a feisty Latina, first gen. So I'm already breaking that mold. So we got to keep having these conversations.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that like makes you a successful therapist is that you bring like the psychology of it and like the scientific part of it, and then you leave out the fucked up shit and you bring in your Latinidad and that sense of community and that sense of like a holistic view of it. I think that's really important. And another reason why we gotta like get you out here, we gotta get more people finding out about you and more workshops and more more events. I love to watch you grow and shine, and I can't wait to see what else you do in the next 60 years, 70 years.
It's gonna be interesting, I'll tell you. I think that a big thing when you're an entrepreneur and you have the ability to be creative in a way that makes sense for you, and knowing that when you have your own business or you write your own podcast or when you have your own anything, you're in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Like there is such power and privilege. Is it scary? Hell yeah. Like this shit is like insane. It's risky. There's risk involved, but when you think of it long term and the potential outcome, the potential community that you build, like I want to go out there and like help change laws. I want to be, and I even can't believe I'm saying this, I want to be what Snoop Dogg was for the Olympics. I want to be that for mental health.
I love that.
That is my goal in life.
Yes, that is you. Like you're bringing your own personality to it and your own take to it, and I can see you doing that. I feel like not only you, but I think all of us have the ability to do whatever we want. You know, that's why I do all the crazy shit that I do, is because like, you know, I told my cousin who, you know, he's gay and he does drag. I'm like, oh, you should make like a page and focus on that. I had a cousin who, or she still is my cousin, but she is like good at art. And I was like, you should like make a page and just do your art and people will follow you. And like, so I'm like, I'm telling all these people, and like, I feel like you could follow your dreams and you can do whatever you want. Like me too. Like we all can. It's just a matter of if you are willing to like make it happen. And I think the book talks about that. You talk about that. I talk about that. It's just something that, you know, we have to keep, you know, talking about and keep normalizing and like advocating for that. But let's tell the people, how can they support you? What is it that you want? Do you want new clients? Do you want to be booked places? Like what is it? How, like where can we find you? Tell me everything that you want. How do you want to be supported?
Yes, no, I love it. So right now I continue to grow my adorable little newsletter, which is like my newest project. And in this newsletter, it is all about, it's called Hablemos about mental health. So it is in a bilingual capacity on not just education, but like anything new or trendy or what is up and coming about mental health. So that is a big one. So my latest edition of my newsletter was on the summer blues, right? And how we hear about the winter blues and we know about seasonal affective disorder, aka SAD, and how it's mainly associated with the winter. But then we have this new concept of summer blues, right? And it's kind of like this weird, funky time of August leading into September and all the changes and everything, how we reflect on summer, what it was and what it wasn't. So really educating. So the newsletter is free. So please subscribe to the newsletter. And if you are listening and tuning in and you're at a company, a school, an organization, and you want to bring me in as a speaker, please find me. I do speaking engagement year round, workshop facilitation virtually. I've been flown out to places. So it really is all about, right, the education awareness of the intersect of Latinos and BIPOC and our mental health. There's an intersect there that we're not addressing in mainstream education and in mainstream media. So that is really that's my drive, right? Follow me on LinkedIn, on Instagram. I have my website. Everything will be linked for sure. But yeah, check it all out.
Yes, I'll put it all in the description. And I love where you said fly me out. Like you didn't say it, but fly my girl out to wherever you have it, in California and Texas and Chicago. Fly my girl out to a workshop or to an event and have her be a speaker. I'm advocating for that one. I'm putting that one in the description. But perfect. This was great. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe on YouTube or Spotify, like, comment, and leave a review. New episodes are uploaded every other Monday. You can also follow me on social media at Chicklit Podcast. And remember, if you have any book recommendations or want to be on the podcast, let me know. Thank you for listening.